We don't always notice the moment a family stops being a family. Sometimes it's small, a look that doesn't return, a chair that's suddenly not yours. In Lena Park's story, it happened in the space between a Christmas song and the clink of silverware, and the silence that followed felt louder than any argument. Lena wasn't asking for a miracle. She just wanted one quiet night where nobody reminded her how far behind she'd fallen. This is how she remembers it. I almost turned around in the driveway. The porch was bright with white lights, the kind my mom loved because they looked clean. Through the window, I could see everyone already seated, plates out, wine poured, my brother Daniel laughing like nothing in the world had ever touched him. I stepped inside with a small gift bag in my hand, cheap tissue paper, a candle I'd bought on clearance. My fingers were cold from gripping it too hard. Mom's smile tightened the second she saw me. "Lena, you made it." "Yeah," I muttered, slipping off my shoes. Traffic. Dad clapped my shoulder a little too firmly, like he was reminding me where I belonged. "Try to have a good attitude tonight." Daniel leaned back in his chair and lifted his glass toward me. Look who decided to show up. I didn't answer. I just took the empty seat at the edge of the table, the one that always felt temporary. Then the front door opened again. My grandfather Samuel walked in, still in his coat, cheeks red from the cold. He didn't hurry. He didn't smile for anyone's comfort. He just looked around the table like he was counting faces. Then his eyes landed on me. "Lena," he began. Quiet. Why are Daniel's in-laws living in the lake house near Lake Norman? The room didn't just go silent, it locked. A fork slipped out of someone's hand and hit a plate with a sharp, hollow clink. Dad's jaw moved like he was chewing air. Mom stared at her napkin. Daniel's smile didn't disappear, but it stopped reaching his eyes. I blinked. Slow. I don't know what you mean." Grandpa set his keys down. One deliberate sound on the wood. "The house I purchased for you. In your name." My throat went dry. I glanced at Daniel, then Mom, then Dad, waiting for someone to laugh and tell me this was a mix-up. Nobody did. Mom's voice finally came out, too bright. "Samuel, it's Christmas Eve. Can we not do this right now?" Grandpa didn't look at her. "We'll do it now. We've heard many kinds of silence on this channel. This one had weight, like everyone was afraid to breathe wrong." Daniel's chair scraped back a fraction. "Grandpa, you just got back. You're tired. You're confusing things." Grandpa's gaze didn't budge. "I'm not confused." I stared at my plate like it might explain something. My bank app had shown $12.50 that morning. I'd been calculating how long I could stretch groceries. "A lake house," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Dad leaned in, voice low, controlled. "Lena, don't start spiraling." I looked up at him, my hands trembling under the table. "I'm not spiraling. I'm trying to understand." Grandpa pulled out his phone and slid it across the table toward me. On the screen was a photo of a pale blue house by water, lights glowing warm in the windows. And on the dock, smiling like it belonged to them, stood Daniel, with Michelle's parents. "If you want to hear the rest of what happened, you can stay with us a little longer." This is the night Lena finally found out why her life never moved forward. The phone stayed in front of me, face up, like it was waiting for an answer I didn't have. I pushed it back toward Grandpa. "That's not my house." Daniel let out a short breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "See, this is what I meant. She doesn't even remember." "I remember plenty," I shot back, then felt my voice shake and hated that it did. I steadied it. "I've never owned a house. I don't own anything." Mom reached for her wine and missed the stem. "Lena, honey, you're stressed. Let's not turn this into a scene." Dad leaned closer. His voice dropped into that careful tone he used in public. "You've had a rough year. Being evicted messes with your head." The word landed hard. Evicted. I lost my apartment because my credit fell apart. I said, not because I imagined a house. Grandpa's eyes didn't leave me. Your credit fell apart how I swallowed. I don't know. I paid my loans every month. I worked 3 jobs at one point. I checked my balance this morning, $12.50. Daniel shifted in his seat. Michelle stared at her plate. Mom shook her head slowly. We tried to help you. You never listen. That's when it clicked how easily they said it. Like my life had been a group decision I'd missed. We've seen this moment before. Not the explosion, but the quiet one, where someone realizes the story they were told about themselves came from inside the room. My hands curled into my napkin. If there's a house, I said, looking straight at Grandpa. No one ever told me. He nodded once. That's what I needed to hear. The table felt smaller after that, like the walls had leaned in. Dad cleared his throat and folded his hands like he was about to run a meeting. We didn't tell you because we were worried about what my voice came out quieter than I meant. Mom glanced at Daniel, then back at me. About you getting overwhelmed. You've always been sensitive. Daniel nodded. Quick. You spiral. Lena, you always have. Remember after college I stared at him. When I worked 3 jobs and still showed up to birthdays, Dad leaned back. Chair creaking. You had trouble coping. We agreed it was better if we handled things. Handled what? The house, Mom said softly, like she was offering a blanket. Until you were stable. The word sat there. Stable. I felt my face heat up. You're calling me unstable. Daniel waved a hand. Nobody's calling you anything. Don't twist it. My chest tightened. You just did. Grandpa's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. Who decided that Mom's eyes flicked to Dad? Dad's jaw worked. It was a family decision. A decision about me. I said. My hands were shaking now, so I tucked them under my thighs. Without me, Dad sighed. Like I was exhausting him. You're proving the point right now. Something cracked, not loud. Just enough. We've watched this turn before the moment concern becomes control, and control pretends it was kindness all along. I stood, then sat back down when my legs wobbled. I graduated at the top of my class. I paid my bills. I asked for help when things got hard. Mom reached out, then pulled her hand back. And you couldn't handle the pressure. Grandpa looked at me again. Slower this time. Lena. Did anyone ever tell you this to your face before tonight? I shook my head. No. They just stopped returning my calls. Daniel pushed his plate away. You're making this bigger than it needs to be? I met his eyes. You made it big when you decided I didn't get to know my own life. The room held its breath. Grandpa didn't speak. He didn't have to. Grandpa slid the phone back toward the center of the table, then turned it so everyone could see. Lake Norman, he said. North Shore, quiet road, not gated. Daniel exhaled through his nose. It's not some mansion. I didn't say it was. Grandpa replied. I said it was hers. Michelle finally spoke, barely above a whisper. We just thought. It was empty. Daniel cut in fast. My in-laws needed a place after they retired. Temporary. They're paying for upkeep. I stared at the photo again. The dock. The lights reflected in the water. It looked calm. Finished. Like a life that didn't include me. They're living there, I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. While I was crashing on couches, Mom shook her head. You wouldn't have wanted to live that far out. It's isolating, Dad added. It made more sense this way. Daniel could keep an eye on things. On my things. I said. Daniel's jaw tightened. Don't do that. Do what? Make it sound like we stole something. I laughed once, short and sharp, then stopped. My hands were cold again. You're standing in pictures of a house I didn't know existed. Explain that part. We've seen how photographs can settle into a room like evidence, even before anyone admits what they prove. Grandpa tapped the table lightly. How much are they paying? Daniel hesitated. Just a beat. Enough to cover costs. That's not a number, Grandpa said. Daniel looked away. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The realization came quietly. They weren't borrowing my house, I said. They were living my life. No one rushed to correct me. I pressed my thumb into the edge of the table and tried to slow my breathing. The room felt warmer, like the heat had been turned up without anyone touching the thermostat. "Grandpa," I said, "can I ask you something?" He nodded. "Go ahead. When you bought that house, did you ever hear from me about it?" His answer came fast. "No." Dad leaned forward. "Because she was overwhelmed. We told you that." Grandpa didn't look at him. I asked her. I swallowed. "Did you ever get my thank you notes or emails?" He shook his head once. "Not a single one." Mom's lips parted, then closed again. That's when it lined up. Not all at once. More like clicks. Job interviews that went great and then vanished. Loan statements that never seemed to change. The time my credit card was declined at the grocery store and Mom told me it was probably my budgeting. I sent payments every month. I said, every single one. I checked the confirmations. Dad's voice went tight. "You're confusing things again. I'm not." I looked straight at him. I logged in. I watched the money leave. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "This is getting out of hand." Grandpa turned to him. "Where did her payments go?" Silence stretched. Michelle shifted in her seat. The Christmas music kept playing, soft and wrong. We've noticed how answers tend to disappear right when they're needed most. My chest felt hollow. "If the money didn't reach my loans," I said slowly, "and nobody ever told me about the house. Then none of this was an accident." Mom whispered my name, like a warning. I shook my head. "No, don't." Grandpa's chair scraped as he stood. Not angry, just steady. "This has gone far enough." For the first time that night, I didn't feel small. I felt alert, like something locked inside me had finally come loose. I didn't plan to say it yet. It just slipped out. Calm in a way that surprised me. Grandpa didn't just show up tonight. Everyone looked at me. Daniel frowned. "What's that supposed to mean I folded my napkin once?" Then again, keeping my hands busy. "He called me months ago. Not through this house. Through Aunt May." Mom's face went pale. "That's not true." "It is." I met her eyes and didn't look away. "He said his letters kept going unanswered. He wanted to know why." Dad shook his head. "Quick, you're misremembering." Grandpa cut in. "I'm not." The room tilted, just slightly, like everyone realized the floor wasn't where they thought it was. Daniel laughed, sharp and thin. "So what? This is a setup." I let out a slow breath. "It's a conversation you never meant to have." Silence pressed down. Michelle stared at the candle in front of her like it might give instructions. Grandpa reached into his coat pocket and set his phone on the table. "I asked you all to come tonight for a reason." Dad's voice dropped. "You ambushed us." "No," Grandpa replied. "You isolated her. We've watched families mistake surprise for betrayal, especially when the truth arrives without permission." I felt steadier now. Not loud. Just clear. I stopped asking questions because every time I did, you told me I was imagining things. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for her glass. "We were trying to keep the peace." Whose peace? The words landed soft but firm. Grandpa straightened. "This ends tonight." No one argued. They couldn't. The pretending had finally run out. The doorbell rang once, clean, unrushed. Grandpa didn't look at anyone when he stood. "That'll be Jonathan." Daniel scoffed. "You brought a lawyer to Christmas." The door opened and a man stepped in, shaking snow off his coat. He nodded to Grandpa, then to me. "Lena." Mom's chair scraped back. "This is unnecessary." Jonathan set a slim folder on the table and didn't raise his voice. "I won't take long." Grandpa gestured. "Start with the house." Jonathan opened the folder. The property near Lake Norman was purchased 6 years ago and titled to Lena Park. There has never been a legal transfer. Daniel leaned forward. That's not true? Jonathan turned a page. Utilities and maintenance were paid using a general power of attorney. The document was never notarized. Dad's face drained. That was just to manage things. Management doesn't include collecting rent, Jonathan said, still calm. $2,400 each month, labeled as upkeep, over 3 years. That totals $86,400. Michelle's breath caught. My stomach flipped, slow and heavy. Jonathan continued. Lena's student loan payments were redirected through an automated routing change. The funds landed in an account controlled by her parents. Mom's voice cracked. We meant to fix it. We've seen how paperwork can turn feelings into facts, and how quickly voices change when that happens. Jonathan slid one last page forward. There were also anonymous emails sent to multiple employers, describing Lena as mentally unstable. The network address traces back here. Silence pressed in, not stunned. Exposed. Daniel pushed his chair back. Dad told me it was fine. Dad snapped, Stop talking! Grandpa rested both hands on the table. Enough. Jonathan closed the folder. That's the record. I didn't feel loud or victorious. Just steady, like the ground had finally stopped moving under my feet. No one spoke right away. The candle between Daniel and Michelle burned low. The wick bent over, stubborn. Daniel broke first. We can fix this. Dad nodded fast. We'll transfer it back. All of it. We just need time. Mom's eyes were wet now. Lena, please. We were trying to protect you. I listened, surprised by how distant their voices sounded, like they were coming from another room. Grandpa turned toward me. This isn't my call. The table waited. I took a breath and felt it all the way down. I don't want apologies, I said. And I don't want promises. Mom reached out again. This time she grabbed my sleeve. You don't understand what this will do to the family. I gently pulled my arm free. I understand exactly what it already did to me. Daniel shook his head. Frustrated. You're blowing this up. Nobody went to jail. Nobody got hurt. My chest tightened. I slept in my car for 3 nights. That landed. We've noticed how certain details stop a room faster than raised voices ever could. Grandpa cleared his throat. The house will be placed into a trust. Lena can live there immediately. It can't be sold for 5 years. Dad opened his mouth. Grandpa held up a hand. Daniel will repay every dollar collected, legal fees included. 30 days to vacate. Daniel went still. Mom whispered, and Grandpa's voice didn't rise. You're done managing anything for her. I nodded once. That's all I need. Not revenge, not forgiveness, just distance that couldn't be crossed again. The house is quiet now, not empty, just calm. I make coffee in the morning and don't rush it. I sit by the window and let the lake stay still. Some nights Grandpa calls. We talk about small things, weather, dinner, nothing heavy. I don't hear from my parents. I don't check for messages that won't come. What surprised me most wasn't the house. It was the space inside my chest. The part that used to brace for impact, it finally relaxed. Lena Park isn't waiting anymore. She isn't asking permission to exist. If you've been listening this far, maybe you already know why this mattered. We step back here not to explain, not to underline anything, just to stay with the quiet that followed. And let it be enough.